Travel Weekly's Mental Health Matters virtual brunch, supported by Travel Zoo and Celebrity Cruises.
Hello everyone, and welcome to this special virtual brunch which forms part of Travel Weekly's Mental Health Matters series of features and events. Mental Health Matters was launched during our 50th anniversary year in 2019, and we couldn't have envisaged how crucial and central to our industry this subject would become. We have been incredibly fortunate to have worked with key partners on the series, including the Mental Health Foundation and ABTA Lifeline, both of whom we will hear from today as we aim to offer support for those in our industry and advice for those leading travel businesses. Over the course of the next 2 hours, we'll be hearing from a range of experts from within and outside the industry, including A&E and television doctor Alex George, who was recently appointed as a government mental health ambassador. We'll also hear from some of those working on the front line of the travel industry who will share their personal stories and offer support and help for all those of us who aspire to positive mental health during our industry's most difficult period. I'm incredibly grateful to all of our speakers and to Travel Zoo and Celebrity Cruises for their support of today's event. We'll be hearing more from them about their own commitment and work in this area a little later on. Now, we understand that some of the subjects discussed today may have particular resonance for you. Please remember that if you or someone you know has been affected by a mental health issue or needs support, it is available from within and outside our industry. And there are some contact details on the screen now, should you need them. So to start off today's discussions and interviews, let's turn first to a panel of speakers, including senior industry executives and experts in the fields of mental health and human resources. To tell us more, it's Travel Weekly's Lee Hayhurst.
Okay, so thank you, Lucy, for that introduction. As you said, we're delighted to welcome our first panel of this morning's event. We're going to hear from a couple of travel businesses and also from Mental Health Foundation. So I'm delighted to welcome Chris O'Sullivan, who is the Head of Communications and Fundraising for Scotland at the Mental Health Foundation. We've also got Derek Jones, who many of you will know as the Chief Executive of Dare Touristique, which is a owning parent. And we've also got Wilma Taylor, delighted to introduce Wilma, all the way from Scotland, from Barhead Travel. She is the Human Resources Director for that leading agency up there in Scotland. So welcome, guys, and it's good to see you this morning.
Hello.
Can we kick off with bringing Chris in to give us a kind of a broad perspective on what we've seen over the last year. There's been lots in the press about mental health and the mental health crisis, particularly focusing on young people, actually, but I'm sure this is something that affects everybody. From your charity's perspective, what kind of things are you seeing about this challenge around mental health and well-being, just more generally in the public?
Sure, it's lovely to be here. So 13, even 14 months ago now, when this pandemic started to emerge and the challenge that we were going to face nationally and personally became clear, it dawned on us that this was likely to be one of the biggest mental health challenges that any of us would face in our lifetimes. And unfortunately, that has transpired. That has been the case. And at the beginning, we decided as a charity that focuses on prevention and public mental health and how we can look after each other and ourselves better, that we needed to know what was going to be happening as it was happening. So we launched a research project with 5 universities across the UK, where we have done polling roughly every 2 or 3 months all the way through the pandemic. So polling of a representative sample of adults. And then we've also done additional polling with teenagers and with people from an ethnic minority, because they're populations that have been of particular interest or concern in relation to the pandemic. So we have good data that starts back in February in some cases, but March, all the way through to February. And we've been looking at what mental health what's been happening in mental health during that time. And there's some good news as well. A lot of people have coped well. A lot of people have found coping strategies, and I'll talk about those in a minute. But there's also some bad news in that the people you would expect to find it challenging have found it challenging. And as many of us have started to recover and feel better about coping with the pandemic and less anxious, that recovery has been slower for the groups we'd most expect that to happen. So when we're looking at recovery now, we have to recognize that many of us will bounce back quite quickly, but those people who have always been at risk from poor mental health are more at risk now and will continue to be so. So throughout the pandemic, as you might expect, at the very beginning, lots of people felt anxious or worried as a result of the pandemic. So right at the beginning, back in April, that was 65% of the UK population felt anxious or worried. And that gradually fell to about 45% by November, but then spiked up again around Christmas when the third wave arrived. But people who have long-term conditions, so people who are at particular risk from the pandemic, and particularly people with pre-existing mental health problems, that's been much higher all the way through. The anxiety is high and remains high. In terms of things like hope, people have been more hopeful than they were in the first lockdown, nearly twice as hopeful. So in February 2021, 30% of people were feeling hopeful about the future compared to only 14% in March. But there are some feelings of hopelessness as well, particularly amongst young people, and also with older people as well, people over 70. And loneliness again has been a factor all the way through. We particularly saw at the beginning of the pandemic a real huge increase in the proportion of young people, young adults, who were saying that they were feeling lonely, which actually probably corresponded to a lot of those people not being in work and enjoying those social connections, which is such an important thing in travel, which has such a young workforce, and where the social dynamic, both with customers and with colleagues, is so very important.
So you, yeah, you're interesting. You used the word hope there, and I thought that was a good word to use, because there is a lot of hope for the near future now in travel, but it's been few and far between over the past year or so. And I guess it's really important in this situation, Chris, from mental health perspective. You know how people have coping strategies, is to feel that you've got a sense of agency in all this, that you can actually make a difference. A lot of people who suffer with mental health lose that sense of agency. They don't have that. They feel as though the world is acting upon them and they don't have any way of changing it. But that has been reality for a year, because we can't change what the pandemic's doing, and in many ways we can't change what the government's reaction to that has been. So that hope aspect has been a really key thing. How do you assess how important hope is for people? So you've got these terms like hope is important, but is the hope that can be damaging as well in some respects?
Yes, yeah. I think hope is vital, and we see when hope rises, particularly when expectations are dashed, that's when we've seen some major challenges in people's mental health. So everybody thought that we would have a linear climb out of the pandemic from Christmas, and then it didn't happen. And that kind of building up of hope being dashed, I think, had a real impact. And I think what you're saying there about agency and control is really important. It's important in mental health across the piece. And one of the things, if any good has come from this horrific situation, and so much bad and challenge has come from it, if anything good has come, it's that we have been able to have more conversations about our mental health. We've been able to talk about how we feel. We've been able to share in a common experience of challenge, which has given people a platform sometimes to talk about the challenges they're facing in their lives. And with work in particular, the boundaries between work and home have been a bit blurred, so people have been able to have those things. We've been asking people about what they've been doing to cope, and actually one of the things, the top answer, if we were doing family fortunes, would be going for a walk outside, which was 59% of people says has helped them to cope with stress, and green spaces 42%, as well as contacting family and friends. And actually that's helped us to set the theme for this year's Mental Health Awareness Week, which is the 10th to the 16th of May, which is around nature and connecting with nature. But we've also seen that people have used some of the more unhealthy coping mechanisms, like drinking alcohol, sometimes taking drugs, eating, overeating or undereating, and we'll need to deal with some of that challenge too. I think the area which is really interesting is teenagers. And we've been doing a bit of extra polling with 13 to 19s at several points. So back in January, 27% of British teens said that they'd felt nervous, anxious, or on edge most or nearly all of the days in the previous fortnight. 26% said that they'd had problems concentrating, 32% that they'd had trouble sleeping, and around a quarter saying that they were annoyed or irritable most of the time. And the teenagers whose parents were unemployed were dramatically more likely to report these experiences, as were teenagers with other challenged backgrounds. So we have to recognise all the way through this piece that the people who are most at risk are the people who are always at risk. And we've seen consistently through our research on mental health in the pandemic that people who have been unemployed during the pandemic have had poorer mental health throughout the piece. And I know that applies to a lot of people in travel as well, where there's been job losses as well as furlough. And as we adjust to our new reality, whatever that looks like, there's a real opportunity to put mental health in with the bricks. This has been a seismic event, in terms of workplace mental health. There were a lot of organizations that were thinking about mental health, as we know from your excellent work at Travel Weekly. But this has created an opportunity as well as a challenge to put things in with the bricks. And in addition to the pandemic, we've had more seismic events, for example, with the tragic death of George Floyd and the increased focus on racial justice in workplaces and other places. So we have this enormous opportunity as we head to the recovery, and I'm really excited to see what Wilma and Derek have been doing in two really well respected brands in the travel industry to start that piece off. And I think the thing to bear in mind for anyone who's in travel or any other business is, if you have an authentic interest in doing this, the opportunities are there to try things and see how they work and to adjust course and develop as you go. The most difficult thing you can do is to do nothing and to expect it all to come out in the wash, because you do need to be proactive, and there are so many things that you can do.
Great. Well, you set up Derek and Wilma brilliantly there. So let's hear from Derek about what you're doing, but maybe a quick comment before we go into that, about where you think the industry is at the minute, based on that discussion about hope and so on. There's an interesting piece in the Times as we speak today from Alex Thompson about psychologists talking about people being in this kind of mid-phase. They've gone from anguish to languish. They've spent a lot of time at home doing quite ordinary things, and now are facing that we're near the end of this. So you'd think there'd be a lot of hope that actually things can get back to normal, but people aren't feeling that enthusiasm for maybe going back to normal in some ways. They're anxious and reticent. Is that how you feel? You'll talk to a lot of your staff about potential return to work. Where are we at as an industry, do you think, at the minute, Derek?
Yeah, I think Chris makes some really good points. There's so many points to pick up on there, actually, in terms of how it relates to our workplace and what we've been doing. And this whole idea of the last 13 months has been a roller coaster. I mean, that phrase has sort of been overused a little bit, but that's exactly what it's been. And that whole thing around hope and hope of recovery, I think we realised pretty early on that it was quite damaging to be over optimistic with our teams. We communicate a lot. Well, I'm sure I'll talk about some of the things that we do. We communicate with our teams a lot. And I think that the temptation was to constantly look on the bright side, to promise recovery was just around the corner. And I think we realised actually that was quite damaging from a mental health point of view. I think the disappointment that followed that, and it was particularly prevalent, I think, in January, when Chris referred to it. There was that moment, wasn't there, in December where it looked as though we were coming out the other side and people were positive and talking about January recovery. And I think at that point we were definitely swimming against the current at that point. And our briefings to our teams at that point were very much, this isn't the end. This is going to go on for longer. I personally would have rather been wrong. And actually we hit a stronger recovery than actually call it more positively and be negative, because by that point a lot of our team are young. A lot of them live alone in flats. The lifestyle they designed for them actually became the trap for them. The guys whose social life revolved around work and pubs and going out, and were happy to live alone and have that independence, suddenly found that the independence actually was the trap that they fell into. So I think all of those things have sort of conspired to create exactly what you talk about, that sort of sensation now where, as we move towards the end, I think there's two things that are happening. One is a sort of maybe a disbelief that it is the end, and again, that reticence to become too positive about it and then actually start to think about what you are going to do, because they've been disappointed so many times before. And secondly, even if you allow yourself to go on that journey, then the reality of what that means. And I'm sure, like many others, we're beginning to dip our toes into the water. I was down in our head office in Dorking yesterday. I drove down the M40, 100-mile journey that I used to do every week, and it was strange. Yeah, it was odd to be in the car and to be travelling to the office and to be in the office and to be with other people. It was great. It was a very positive experience, but there's still that tension and that nervousness about what does that mean. And we're all very different. All of our lives are so different, and I think there's been this sort of almost like a magnifying effect of whatever your circumstances are. I think for some people, and I'm fortunate enough to include myself in this, I live at home in a nice house with my family in a big garden. A lot of aspects of lockdown have been very positive from a mental health perspective for me and those around me. But for others, it's been the opposite. It's made things a lot worse. It's magnified loneliness. It's made them feel less connected. And I think coming out from that and having the confidence to sort of rediscover the old ways and getting back into your old routine, that can in itself be quite stressful for people. And I think there's a lot of that happening at the moment. Teenagers are very interested. I've got several of my own, and personally, just to echo what Chris said, I think that as a generation, I think they've really, really, they have had it tough. And I guess more as an employer, I think we need to understand the challenges that's put parents under, parents that are living at home with teenagers who maybe should have been at university. They've been waved off. The parents have turned a corner, and suddenly the kids are back. They're stressed. They're feeling anxious. Parents are having to deal with that, plus the day job. All of these things sort of conspire to create an environment that is very challenging. And I think we all need to be aware of that and take steps to try and address it.
I suppose the opposite side of scope, which is where you be careful not to, is over catastrophize as well, because if you tell people it's going to be dreadful and they're quite vulnerable anyway, that could push them down a road of something that is quite natural in a crisis turning into a problem. So it's a difficult balance, isn't it, Derek, to strike the tone of what you do with your employees and the things that you tell them.
It is difficult, and I think because we've always been we're a very people-focused business. I'm sure Wilma will say the same about Barhead. I know how those guys were. Pre-pandemic, we were very engaged with our teams, but in a very sort of physical way. We were visiting stores, we were doing conferences, we were meeting our teams, we were having town halls in head office. We were always visible, and we always wanted to talk. And I think when we landed a year ago in the pandemic, we quickly came up with ways to fill that gap. A lot of it was around, we do Kuoni TV every week. We have coffee breaks where staff can come and join. But I think all of that's been really positive, and that's really, it has helped us and the team come through the pandemic. But the temptation was simply to just throw positivity out, the sort of jolly idiot sort of approach where it's fine, we are, we're still talking. And actually, I think we realised very quickly that wasn't what we needed to do and not what people wanted to hear. And we were talking to very different audiences. When we furloughed a large number of our team, we made sure that when we did Kuoni TV, that everybody that was furloughed had equal access to those lines of communication. So we had a very broad audience that were watching that. We had people who were disconnected from work in every other capacity other than they were getting these sort of weekly updates from us. But it was the same updates that were going to people who were working probably as hard as they'd ever worked, dealing with customer complaints and dealing with rebookings and all of the administration that went along with the crisis that we faced at that time. And so the danger was that we focused too much on the people that were still working. And it was a very conscious decision on our part that we did one communication to everybody regularly, so that it sort of helped to bind the people who were still working with the people who were on furlough, and the people on furlough with the people who were working, so that we didn't get that division and we didn't sort of start to see a separation of messages. And as I say, we've just been as honest as we can be. I tend to start every one of those weekly TV sessions with a sort of 5-minute overview of where are we at, which sounds like an easy question, but you go back to some of those sort of Boris briefings and Grand Chaps updates, and actually just updating where are we and what's our view as a business as to what that means is quite tricky. But I think it was important that our staff understood what the leadership team view was, like what our prediction was, what we thought, and to do that very honestly, and to set out the challenges and to set out the road that we were getting, what our strategy was in response. And I think because we did that, we've carried a lot of the team with us. A lot of the team have understood that we're struggling as much as they are, because quite often we've just had to hold our hands up and say we don't know, you don't know, we don't know. We're just going to have to deal with what comes next. And I do think that was the right approach to take.
Yeah, let's bring you in. Derek mentioned the importance of communications there. I know that's a big part of what Barhead's been up to. But we also pointed out about the particular impact on young people. And I'm sure you will have lots of young people in your business, or people in different circumstances, for whom this situation has been really hard for them to cope with, because we, as Derek alluded to, we're a very optimistic industry. Actually, we want to be optimistic. What we sell, or what you sell, is a very optimistic product. It's to look forward to. So how has Barhead been working to keep those people optimistic and looking forward, but not too depressed about what the current situation is?
Yeah, so I agree with everything that Derek and Chris have said. These are extremely challenging times for the travel industry in particular. I mean, we've basically come to a standstill. And like Derek said, we just have to be honest, open, honest, transparent with everything. We don't have a crystal ball. We wished we did. People are asking us for answers, and we just don't have the answers. But we do believe that, the main thing is communication, keeping the lines of communication going and making sure what employees can do, where they can turn to, making sure that they're aware that we're here as a business, we're here for them, we're here for everyone. That's including the active furloughed, the active employees and the furloughed employees. We have people on maternity leave still, we have people that have gone off sick. So, we're doing lots around employee well-being. So we have a town hall on a monthly basis where we provide like a business update. So everyone gets involved in that. So the senior leadership team will provide the business update on where we're at. Training gets involved in what's new for training. We're also providing training opportunities for those that are active in the business and those that are furloughed. So we have recorded links that they can access. We've invested in some wellbeing, albeit remote and virtual, but some beginners classes for fitness. So we have a personal trainer that does beginner classes, and also a trainer that does the advanced classes. So really a huge focus for Barhead at the moment is always the people. Yeah. We've had Bring a Pet to Work Day. We've had things from dogs, cats, albeit virtually. We've even had some chickens, which has been interesting. So there has been some amazing things going on, but communication is absolutely the key to everything that we're doing. And, like Derek said, we just have to be absolutely honest. we don't know the answers. We don't have the answers.
Chris, you want to say something there on chicken? The word chicken seems
yeah, that was it was an applause for the chickens, but actually I think you've just put the hammer right on the nail there with those two things together. I think always with workplace mental health, you're looking for a balance of sorting business as usual with innovation and excitement. And traditionally, you had companies that were brilliant at providing gyms and mindfulness and fruit skewers, but absolutely rode you into the ground and didn't communicate with you. Or people who were quite good at management but didn't do any of the other bits. And I think, everybody always picks up on, have you heard Barhead had chickens in the workplace, and everyone had a chance to hold a chicken under their arm and feel that special thing you feel where there's a chicken under your arm. But at the same time, their senior leadership team were also talking to people and creating a culture where communication was expected and appropriate. And both of those things together are where the magic happens.
Well, tell me, do you get a sense in your business that a lot of your staff, and I'm thinking in particular maybe of the retail staff whose job it is to go into a shop and interact with customers in a retail setting, that a lot of their well-being revolves around their job. So the fact they've not been able to do that has been very challenging for them. Do you get a sense that maybe as a company that's particularly important for Barhead and maybe for the travel industry in general?
Yes, I definitely think, they miss that social aspect of it. So, that they're missing engaging with their customers, meeting up with their colleagues, actually getting up in the morning, getting on a bus or a train, commuting to work, who you meet. We're missing all of that social interaction. So I'm absolutely sure that is a challenge for them. But again, we're doing everything we can, albeit virtual. So we have drop-in rooms. We have an HR virtual room where our colleagues can pop into if they need help and support. We're still encouraging the managers, the team leaders, the supervisors, to make contact with all the employees. We have team meetings on a daily basis. We have dress up days. We have beach party days. We just try and keep all of that interaction going and keep some of that fun going. But yes, definitely the social side of it. There will be people that will be worried about going back, and there'll be other people that will be absolutely, delighted to be getting back out from within their home environment and four walls, I'm sure.
Just give us an update as to where you are now with getting back. I know the office is open, although you're coming in from home today, and shops are opening again. So where are you in that process of bringing people back into the workplace?
Yeah, so again, there's been a lot of well thought processes and procedures, protocol documents. Our English stores, the first batch opened on the 12th, the next batch opened on the 19th, so just this week. But we have a complete document which covers off the new world of work. So we need to look at the social distancing, we need to look at all the PPE that's required, we need to look at the number of staff that we have, the desk spacing, the training, because obviously things have changed, supplier information's changed. They need to understand what they can sell, what they can't sell, what's on the red list, so all of this, it's been a huge piece of work to actually get the workplace opened. And we need to do that. We recognise that we have a duty of care to not just our employees, but to our customers. So there's a huge protocol document that actually covers off everything from you enter the store till you close up at night.
And are you thinking that this return will be in 100% eventually, or do you think you'll continue with a hybrid approach of working from home and working in a workplace for all staff?
Yeah, I think based on the numbers, Lee, I think we will try and get back to maximum capacity as business returns and the government legislations and guidelines allows us to do that. But I do think moving forward there will be this hybrid of home working and store working. Yeah, I think that's going to be right throughout the industry.
Yeah. Derek, where's Quoney at with that? I know, again, you said you were in the office yesterday. You're not in full time. You've got stores as well reopening. Where are you in the process of getting people back into some sort of normal working?
Yeah, from a timeline point of view, identical to Barhead really. So we opened our first stores on 12th of April. We opened some more 19th, and we're slowly rolling out based on demand, which is as ever fluctuates by the day almost. So it's very difficult. What we're quite keen to avoid is another in-out, shake it all about moment where we put everyone back in store and then we end up having to close them all again. So we're being pretty cautious with it. I do think our model has changed fundamentally, and it won't go back to where it was. We'll have fewer shops in the future than we had at the start of the pandemic. They won't all reopen, and we've already made those announcements. And the virtual call centre that we sort of had to put in place very quickly a year ago has now become a very successful, integral part of our business model. So we'll continue with that. And what's been interesting over the course of the last 3 months as that planning cycle has sort of got underway and evolved is the sort of the split amongst our team about who really can't wait to get back into store. And, to your point, they're driven by that face-to-face interaction. They're driven by that sort of public service piece, and that's what they can't wait to do. But equally, some people have taken to home working. They love the flexibility. It gives them more time with their family. They want to continue to do that. So we're going through a process right now of appointing people permanently to the virtual call centre. Many of the original people will be the ones whose stores have closed, but equally, we've had a lot of hands go up from stores that are staying open, from people who say, actually, if that's a permanent part of our way of working in the future, then we'd like to be considered for that. Of course, we'll go back into store for now. That's what we were contracted to do, and we're very happy to do it. But hey, we like this new way of working, and we'd like to explore that more into the future. So that's what we're doing. We're working with all of our team to try and work out what's the most appropriate answer for them as individuals. And hopefully very quickly, we're going to get back into recruitment mode, and we cut back quite aggressively to save costs last year. But because of the way we've communicated with our teams, including ex-employees, we set up a communication group of people that we'd made redundant. We helped them into other jobs. We set up a website to promote their skills. And we've continued to stay in touch. There's a great Facebook page called Quoney Past and Present, which got about 1,000 people on it. It's people who've worked with us historically or very recently been made redundant. And actually, I think when recovery does come, a lot of people that unfortunately had to leave us through, not through choice, but through redundancy, actually will come back, and they'll come back quickly. That's a good news story for the people who stayed as well. Their colleagues can come back and join them in store, and that gives us the ability to be more flexible with the people that want to continue to work from home. So it's a complicated jigsaw to put together, but that's what we're doing, and we're working with our teams, and they understand where our objective is. And they're being very flexible about it. So, yeah, it's like all of these things. We've learned so much through this pandemic, and it has given us new opportunities, and I think it's given individuals a different perspective. Looking at the positive side of mental health, I think for some people it has made them realise that there are more important things in their life than getting up at 7 o'clock every morning, commuting an hour to an office, and doing the same for the next 5 days before dragging it out. That's not ideal for everybody. It is for some, but I think some people have realised it's not for them, and they don't want to go back to that when this is all over.
Before we started recording, we had a great discussion about the commute and being one of the challenges of going back. So psychologically, one of the challenges. What other things are you hearing, though, Derek, from your staff about the anxieties around coming back into the workplace? I'm sure the commute's one of them, but there must be many others.
Yeah, there are. I mean, it's fairly low level, I have to say, in the whole scheme of things. I think we've been very open, and we've talked about sort of that dialogue we've maintained in the communication. We've made sure that our frontline teams, that their voice has been heard as well. And people have been people have been very open and very honest about the challenges they faced. And maybe actually this is a topic that we now need to cover with our teams as well in one of those forums. But we've had people who've come onto Coeni TV who've been happy to communicate with their colleagues about the challenges that they faced and how they've dealt with them. And I think the return to work is just the next one. I think we'll be as open about that as we have been with all the other challenges, and we'll try and understand what concerns people have. At this point, it's the lifestyle piece, and I suppose that is what Chris was talking about. It is that sort of the new normal has become entrenched, hasn't it? As in this bit that we've gone through for 13 months, it's gone on for so long that it's hard coded into us now, isn't it, to be like this? And it's like it's any change is challenging, isn't it? The change from that new hard coded way of living into another one that, albeit you might be familiar with from a year and a half ago, but right now it still feels very alien and very different. And I think that's the piece that people are beginning to think about, and we need to be the same as we have been all the way through to help them through that process.
Yeah, I think there isn't
that return to work challenge. What should employers look out for when they're going through this process to make sure their staff are happy with what's being asked of them?
Yeah, I think the idea of new normal was something that people started talking about in about July, as they thought this would all be over and that they would just transition gently back from 3 months away from the office back into the office. And I think the way I think about this is that most people who work in offices have now been away from an office for a year. That's like a leave of absence or a maternity leave or a major thing in someone's lives. And when we're thinking about a transition back, we have to think about it in the same way as we would think about that kind of transition. If you've been off sick for a year with a major illness, or you'd taken a sabbatical, you wouldn't just say, right, we'll rock up on Monday and start doing your regular job again. So I think we have to be prepared for the fact that people will need a period of adjustment, that there will be a period of challenge in relation to mental well-being, because this is a change to what they've become used to. I think there's something about asking people how they want to work going forward and enabling people to keep aspects of the positive which they have found useful, if that works in the business's framing. And certainly the idea of hybrid work is not without challenge in terms of psychological hazards. So we've become very familiar with the idea of Zoom fatigue and what it means to have your face visible and every kind of tick and eye movement decoded by people for what it might mean. But actually, one of the things that I'm concerned about with an office environment is blended working, because I was a person, I think Derek, you worked from home a period of time in a week as well. I was always the person on Teams when everyone else was in the office, and I know what it's like to be the person at the end of the black box, and I'm not the chief exec, Derek. So I think once we go back into an office where people are working blended, we're going to have to be very careful not to cut off the contact for the people who are at home. And it was the same with people who were shielding when folk could go out in the summer. It was easy to forget those people because you are now reveling in the excitement of what you had. So that's going to be really important, particularly since the opportunity to work from home means that there are people who have not traditionally been represented in the workforce who have huge opportunities to put in their talents. So disabled people, working parents, all those kinds of folk who were possibly excluded from commuting to a job that was a long way away, and who can now do that effectively. So we'll have to find new ways of working and making sure that people aren't left out. And we have some tips for going back to work, and one of those things is thinking about a mental health plan for that, for you personally. What are you going to need? What are you going to try and keep a hold of that was good for you? What can you not wait to get rid of about working at home? What's going to be difficult? Is it going to be being on the tube? Is it going to be public transport? Is it going to be in constant interruptions from colleagues? And how are you going to boost through that? And how are you going to carry on working with some restriction? is a mask going to be a problem? Are you going to face challenge, and what can an employer do about that? And I think, as with all things workplace mental health, it comes down to the simple things that are really hard to do, and that is being psychologically safe for people to talk about stuff which is bothering them without fear of consequence. It means balancing performance management with individuals' desires to do things and the way they do things. It's communicating change, and it's being receptive to having open conversations about challenges that people have. And many managers have been doing that, although we've just done a bit of research up here in Scotland which says that still only 26% of people feel able to be completely open about their mental health at work. And we've also been hearing a little bit about a backlash. I've had a few conversations with people saying, I'm sick of well-being conversations. I don't want to talk about my well-being anymore. I'm really fragile and I just want to get on with my stuff, because if they ask me how I am, I might fall apart. So it's a balance to be struck, and it depends on your culture and your community. But the opportunity to put mental health in with the bricks, as I was saying, of this recovery is really important.
Yeah, Wilma, I'm just interested in, as our HR professional on the call, some views on how it changes your role actually in the business, and the role of HR in business in general, apart from working out the health and safety of having chickens in the office and other pets and wildlife. What does it do to your role as an HR professional and for businesses in general taking HR more seriously?
Yeah, I definitely think, it's a huge focus. It's a shift in focus. I think we've now moved from operations to everything about people. And we're seeing obviously the business benefits of doing that. So we need to look at all our policies and our procedures around what does the work-life balance look like moving forward. There will be need to be more flexibility around working. We will seriously need to look at requests for home working. So yeah, I think that the whole HR piece has changed to a people focus rather than an operational employee handbook. There's a huge focus on mental health, well-being, how we can change the workplace for the future. And I think how people are going to see what the workplace is going to look like, what that work-life balance is going to be like. It's going to be important moving forward. Yeah. All of these, flexibility is going to be huge. I think it's really going to be a big focus.
Yeah. Well, as we wrap things up, interesting what Chris is saying there about the actual danger of overdoing a little bit, and maybe the best thing for people to do is just get back to work and not talk about it so much. Just get on and do it. So just a quick final thought from all three of you, just on the future and what you think we're going to see. Derek, what gives you optimism for the future in terms of what we've learned through the last year about how companies look after their staff in a more personal way?
I think in many ways, I think this whole pandemic is, I used the word before, but it's sort of magnified everything. And I think before this crisis, we'd already partnered with Mind. Mental health was high on our agenda. We'd recognised that it was a topic that was much more relevant in the workplace. We've been working with Travel Weekly on some of the forums that you guys have been doing. All of that was happening anyway. I think what has happened during the pandemic is that whole visibility piece is just taken, it's moved on to a different level, and I think that's a positive thing. I think if we take something good out of all of this, it's that it's forced businesses to recognise that people are their most important asset, and the sort of health and well-being of their teams is what differentiates them from their competitors. And for a business like ours, and I'm sure Barhead as well, that's part of our DNA. It's part of our philosophy, is that we're a people business, and that's our differentiation for the customers. So I don't think it's any bad thing that we've had to focus in on that we've had to ask difficult questions, and that we've had to become a lot closer to our teams. It sounds odd because physically we've been more distant, but I genuinely think we've been closer to our teams for the last year than we've ever been before, and that's built a sense of team that's probably stronger than it's ever been. So I think it puts us in a good place. We have to acknowledge that for individuals within that team, this has been a real challenge, but hopefully the support they've had, and not from us as a leadership team, but from their colleagues and from the whole organisation, means that they will be more open in the future, that they will feel as though they can talk, and that and if they need help, that they can call for help, and the business will be there to support them. So I take a positive view. I think it's been a roller coaster, and that's a cliche that's overdone, but it has been a roller coaster. But hopefully we're getting towards the end, and we can we can start to get back to some semblance of normality again.
Of course, roller coasters are meant to be fun. Let's put the positives out of what we can. But a quick final word to Chris before we finish entirely. We brought you into this conversation in travel a few years back when we started our Mental Health Matters campaign. And I get the sense that you've always been quite impressed by how in travel sector in businesses are approaching this topic. Are you more impressed today than you have been in the past? And do you think the industry is really getting to grips with this? Or are there still things that it needs to be aware of? Because I guess this isn't a thing that finishes. This isn't a project that ends. This is ongoing.
No. Yeah, I think that's really interesting. And actually, I've just been reading Simon Sinek's latest book called The Infinite Game, and it definitely applies to mental health in work. It's an infinite thing. We can always do better. I think travel it's one of those industries that if you know it, then you know how special it is, and I do because of my dad's career in the business. But people outside don't get it in the way that people inside do. I can only imagine what it's like in the industry at the moment, with people not able to do the thing that gives them their life force. And also with the vast range of roles that's in the industry at all sorts of levels, and what the impact that is on people who are at the sharp end of retail or reps and other kinds of things. I can only imagine it's like a starvation or a drought where people are desperate and they see water and a buffet on the horizon, and we have to be really careful about how we readjust to things. So I really hope that the system shock that travel has had from this allows those bits of the travel business that weren't doing the stuff that Keone and Barhead and others have been doing, that we've heard of in the industry, to start doing it. And I guess there's three messages I'd give, take-home messages. One is for individuals, which is try and find a way to take what you need for you without shame or judgment, and say no whenever you can. That's a burnout thing. One for teams, lift up your colleagues whenever you can, listen and be an ally for those people who experience challenge. And finally, for leaders and managers, use your power and influence for good. Check your privilege, and if you can change things, get mental health on the radar for the big return.
Lovely. Great way to finish. Some great tips there. So that just leaves me to thank you guys for joining us today. Thanks, Wilma. Thanks, Derek. And thank you to Chris.
It was a pleasure.
That wraps up this opening session, and then on to the rest of the event. Thank you very much, guys. Thank you.
Thank you, Lee.
Thank you.
Cheers.
Well, thank you, Lee, and a huge thank you to Derek, Wilma, and Chris for sharing their expertise and advice for those running travel companies during this devastating pandemic, and those on the front line. Now, before we hear from today's keynote speaker, Dr. Alex George, let me first introduce one of our sponsors of today's Mental Health Matters Brunch, Celebrity Cruises, as I catch up with Vice President and Managing Director, Europe, Middle East and Africa, it's Joe Jamoska. Well, I'm delighted to be joined now by Joe Jamoska from Celebrity Cruises. Welcome, Joe. Thank you very much for sponsoring this event. Tell us why it was important for Celebrity to be involved.
Hi, thank you, Lucy. Good to see you again. Throughout the organisation, really, not just from Celebrity Cruises, but the Royal Caribbean Group, at the core of the business, we've really been working with, as an organisation, with our employee resource groups, and a key one being mental health and well-being overall. And what we've seen is during this pandemic time is, as I sort of say, we're all in the same storm, but we're all in a very different boat. And I think a key thing is really trying to understand what each of the employees are going through. And one of the things that I think we're proud of as an organisation is that by forming this employee resource group, how many more of our employees have chosen to take part in it during this time. Because I think what we've been able to do generally in society is to break down the stigma more and more of mental health and allow people the opportunity not to feel that they should be embarrassed about it or that they are nervous about speaking out about it, and showing that we genuinely, as an organisation, are putting in measures to make sure that we can support people. And that's why we were delighted when we had this opportunity to support this really important day.
Yeah, well, we're really grateful for your involvement. And that sounds very interesting, your group, Joe. So what kind of things do you do with them? You're saying more people have signed up. So what kind of things are you doing with these people?
So we bring in guest speakers. We bring in guest speakers who will talk about mental health and the importance of being open. I mean, we have seen generally throughout the world, throughout the nation, an increase in even suicidal thoughts or suicide potentially, especially among the younger generation, especially among young men as well. It was probably a subject matter that before we wouldn't have actually spoken about, but we've had people come in and talk about that. We have people who come in and do Reiki and do all kinds of conversations about the importance of looking after yourself, the importance of nutrition, the importance about making sure that you do look after yourself physically, especially when we're all spending so much time on the screen. Every day we get a little message from them or a little motto linked to how are you feeling today. And I think the other thing we found is that people have been able to either open up more to line managers or find other members within the group that they can talk to. And also in training line managers as well. So we've done training on what to look out for and what to really focus in on, and making sure that we get to understand really what's happening more behind the square. You know, we're all squares on a screen, and how do we really make sure that we look out for certain signs and how we can focus in on that and make sure that we're encouraging people if we feel that potentially they're really struggling, that we can help them out.
Yeah, and of course, I know we're all squares. We're a square today, aren't we? Talking to each other, but things are starting to reopen, and I think one of the key things is actually how we're going to go back to work. You know, perhaps not full time, perhaps in a very different way, but that's also causing some people some anxiety. So is that something you'll focus on as well?
It is. We do a pulse survey every month where we gather feedback from the employees as to how they're feeling now as we start to open up, how they are feeling about going back to the office, how they're feeling about vaccinations, how they're feeling about the work environment, flexibility as we go back. And I think one of the things we've all learned is that the new norm living with COVID will be different to pre-COVID. So we're absolutely looking at taking back that feedback and looking at how we re-enter. Some people can't wait to go back, and others are more reticent about going back. And how do we work through that?
Yeah, and finally, Joe, I know this is something that you've done for your employees, but I know the trade are really important. Lots of your team are communicating and have been through this pandemic so well with agents. So do you think some of the things they're learning through your program at Celebrity, they've been able to sort of impart and sort of spread to the agent community?
Well, interesting you say that. We launched RCL Cares very early on, over a year ago now. Yes. And it was a portal that a website that our incredible IT team built within literally a couple of weeks. And that we've continued to refresh. And in fact, all of our wellbeing programs, our program with, all of the programs that we have are all accessible for our trade partners as well. A lot of the recordings that we're doing. So yes, very much so. And we constantly keep in touch and try to keep them as upbeat as we can as well, because, you know, this is an extraordinary time. We are starting to come out of it, and we want to make sure that we take people with us on the journey, understanding that different partners as companies and different individuals within those companies will all be in different places too.
Yeah, well, listen, we're so grateful for your support today. As you said at the outset, this is a really important subject. We talk about mental illness, but it's about mental health, isn't it? We want to all be healthy, and we're so grateful. So thank you very much for your time, Joe.
Thank you. Thank you, Lucy.
Thank you again to Joe and to Celebrity Cruises for your work and commitment to positive mental health and your support of today's event. Okay, so now we turn to a keynote speaker who will be familiar to many of you. Following his recent appointment as a government mental health ambassador, I caught up with A&E and television doctor Alex George. Well, I am delighted to be joined now by Dr. Alex George, who is known, of course, to us all as an accident and emergency doctor, as a social media influencer, and as a mental health campaigner. Indeed, he has recently been appointed by Boris Johnson as the government's youth mental health ambassador. So we're delighted you could join us, Alex.
Hello, hello. Thank you so much for having me.
Well, it's great to have you here. Obviously, talking about mental health, mental well-being has come to the fore a lot, particularly in the last year. But I know it's something that you've been a massive advocate of for a long while, and you're particularly passionate, I know, about making it into a positive issue. What do you really mean by that, Alex?
Yeah, I think, Lucia, the last year, I think everyone's kind of focused so much on a lot of issues around health, but I think mental health has come to the forefront because, I don't think there's many people that haven't been impacted by this pandemic in some way, whether it's inability to see loved ones, whether it's being, unwell yourself with COVID, whether it's working on the front line, whether it's having to work at home. It's impacted everyone, I think. And there's been obviously a lot of negative around that, of course, and like the effect of mental health has been massive, but it also, I think, has made people stop and go, do you know what? Actually taking care of my health, my physical and mental health is a really good thing. And I think people have realized that self-care, investing time in yourself and your own well-being is actually a really positive thing. And I think that's a really good step that we're making. Of course, it comes from a place of, tragedy this year with everything that's happened this pandemic, but at least it's something positive that we can hold on to and hopefully bring forward into future life now.
Yeah, absolutely. And I know you've been able to do that because of your huge platform. I think you might be up to about 2 million followers now on Instagram, which is amazing. So how have you okay? Well, so how have you used that platform? I know we're going to come on to talk about your new role, but just your platform in general. I mean, you must have loads of people following you and listening to what you're saying, your medical background, etc. So how have you managed to use that and promote it?
It's been quite a learning curve over the last few years, to be honest, because before I went on that show Love Island, I had like 190 followers or something. I wasn't big on social media. I really enjoyed teaching. I loved education. I loved, teaching med students, and I loved all that side of things in terms of communication and education. But I wasn't really online teaching with social media or sharing information. I kind of kept quite private, and then I came out with this platform and thought, well, what am I going to do with this? And it's not my style to perhaps influence in a typical kind of way. I was like, well, I'm passionate about mental health. I'm passionate about well-being. I love my job. So let's share some of that on my platform. And that's just naturally evolved throughout time. I think particularly during the pandemic, I felt a responsibility, a duty, in fact, I'd go as far as saying that, to share information about what was going on, to give people insight into the front line, what we're seeing, what we're experiencing, to give people hopefully sensible and solid advice. And I think it's evolved even further now in the last 6 months or so to campaign around mental well-being and to share mental health advice. Obviously, the role has come about really because I launched my campaign on social media and had an immense amount of support. I mean, can't underestimate really the power of social media. I mean, it literally got me into number 10 really to speak to the Prime Minister. So it's a very powerful tool.
Sorry, Alex, but you had already tried to raise the issue or to campaign a bit with the previous Prime Minister, hadn't you? You tried to speak to, or you had spoken to Theresa May. And I think at that time you were concerned about the spike in sort of deaths or suicides of university students. So that was pre-pandemic, which of course it's got much worse. But so tell us about that, and then how you then got into number 10 again to talk to.
Yeah, so I came out of Love Island, I think 2018, and I started working with Samaritans and Mind and some of the other main charities, I guess, around mental well-being to help campaign and raise awareness and hopefully work on stigma as well. And I ended up going to with Samaritans on World Mental Health Day to number 10. I spoke briefly to Theresa May and raised my concerns about the issues. And I think as time's gone on, especially the pandemic, that momentum was built up hugely. And obviously, very sadly, my brother took his life in the summer, and that was very hard. But it just it gave me even more kind of, oomph that I need to do something. And so that, I think, was a tipping point, together with everything that's happened and what everyone's experienced, to, gain the kind of support that I have had to, push for change. I never really meant to end up in this ambassadorial role. My goal was to share some ideas that I had around mental health and work on highlighting the issue. And now, in this role, I'm not there as an expert to advise the government. I'm there to raise awareness around mental health, to make sure that young people's voices are heard in policy making and funding. And key point really is around stigma, because, there's still a stigma around mental health. We're making progress. I think we are making. I want to keep banging that drum for mental health, keep raising that awareness, and making sure that we're, moving as quickly as we can towards a society that is not just tolerant and understanding around mental health, but is actively open about it.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you mentioned your brother there, Alex. I know it must be very hard to talk about, but in relation to the point about stigma, I read an article in the Guardian interview with you, and you talked about how, he hadn't spoken to anybody, and you felt, I mean, we'll never know, but you felt that perhaps he might have been ashamed of how he was feeling and hadn't been able to open up and talk to someone. So is that really the starting point, and what you're doing with your role, to just encourage people to talk, or make sure there are those avenues for people to reach out and get help?
Yeah, I think a lot of, and it is stereotyped as men, but I think the stats undoubtedly back that statement, that I think men particularly struggle to reach out and speak about mental health or their struggles. I think there's a lot of women out there that also, and other people that experience it, but it definitely seems to be a big issue amongst young men. And so, my brother, he didn't say anything, and I think shame might have been a part of that. It shouldn't be, of course it shouldn't be. I mean, that's an obvious statement to make, but unfortunately people feel that way. So it's our responsibility as a society as a whole to look at why that is the case and what we can do to change it. A big part of that, I believe, comes from education, from changing the way we talk about mental health at school, to make well-being more of a priority, that people become more comfortable to speak out. And I think cultural expectations of men, people expect them to be stoic and a certain way that men should behave. I think that puts so much pressure on young people, and they really struggle then to open up sometimes. That is changing, we're getting better, but I think we need to speed this up, particularly post-pandemic. Young people going back to school, of course, for a lot of people, this is great, I think, to go back to school. Obviously, I'm hugely in support of that, but I think we can't forget what they've experienced during the pandemic, the loss they might have experienced, the difficulties at home they might have experienced, and we need to support them and help them through this time. And I think education, as I say, is key with regards to mental health and changing the culture. That is one of the biggest ways I think we can do that.
Yeah, well, this is one of the reasons we're so excited you could join us today, Alex, because the travel industry is a sector where lots of people go straight from school into jobs like being travel agents or overseas holiday reps. We have a very young workforce, and of course for the last year travel's been off limits pretty much, and so we've had a lot of people facing redundancy, a lot of people on furlough for over a year, still on furlough, probably will be till September, and then don't even know if they'll get their job back. I know this is in many sectors, but in travel we're really feeling that, as you can imagine. And I wondered what your advice would be for those people. I think people are feeling very lost. If they've been on furlough, they maybe they liked it for the summer for a bit, they got a bit of time, but now they're feeling worthless, helpless. These are the kind of words that we are hearing. So what would your advice be to people in that position?
I think we need to just be really, mindful that, how much people have been affected by this pandemic in different kind of ways. And certain sectors like the travel industry has been, I'd imagine, hugely impacted. And my obviously thoughts go to everyone, your job, your feeling of like, this is your purpose, this is what you're doing, having that taken away, or at least not knowing what's going to happen with that must be so difficult. So, I think you can't control everything in life. And unfortunately, we can't control the pandemic as a whole. We can take obviously individual choices, but we can't stop what's happened, unfortunately. So taking control of the kind of sphere of influence, I guess, is one of the things. So you as I say, you can't change the pandemic, but you can be mindful to take care of your own kind of well-being in that time, and make sure that you're still exercising well, that you're communicating, you're talking to people. Is it talking to people within the industry and colleagues? Is it talking to friends and family about what you're experiencing? All of these things, and these kind of, I guess, anchors of our well-being, help us, maintain our health and happiness. Because ultimately, if we let ourselves lose our way, we lose our routine, and we're not taking care of ourselves, we're not going to be in the best position when the pandemic lifts to try and sort things out with work. So yeah, try and look after yourself. It's not easy, of course, and I can only imagine how difficult it is, but try and look after yourself, and of course reach out if you're struggling, and make sure you get support from colleagues, you talk to your organization, your company, and as I say, friends and family as well, because it is a difficult time. It's all about pulling together, I think.
Yeah, you talk about talking to colleagues and leading on your company. Have you found that companies have been much more embracing of mental well-being? Have you seen that sort of increase in the last couple of years, where people, they're having proper mental health advisors and, doing more for their workforce to make sure that they are, looked after and feeling good and happy, etc.?
Yeah, I think organizations as a whole have realized, I think companies, businesses, even the NHS has realized that looking after your workforce is vital. If you've got a happy and healthy workforce, they're more likely to be successful, contribute, and be able to enjoy their jobs and fully participate and perform in their career, really. So we look at healthcare side of things, and we've got much more support in terms of counselling, services to reach out. There's signposting more, and I think it's really important, and I think it's a duty really for organisations to travel companies as well, as much as they can, to actually support their staff and support their well-being.
Yeah, well, we're definitely seeing more of that. So it's and I'm sure
Good.
we'll just see even more. I mean, the other point about travel, whether you're working in it or just a consumer of travel, is we haven't really been able to go away, and I wonder how important that is. We sometimes, I think, we felt during this pandemic, of course we know that the public health crisis is the most important thing, and we get that, but there is a real kind of benefit, isn't there, of going on holiday for reconnecting, recharging, all of those kind of things, and we've all missed out on that. So we're trying to sort of say that holidays are not frivolous, they're really important to the whole nation, and when we're trying to get things moving again. But do you agree with that?
Absolutely. I mean, I remember one of my last trips was away with Carnival, actually, on a lovely cruise. So I've been dreaming of that cruise. I posted a picture from it actually out in Miami, and I was thinking, oh God, I'd go back to that in a heartbeat, because getting away and travel and getting some sunshine, it's an important part of just releasing, isn't it? De-stressing from work life and spending quality time with loved ones and friends and family, and seeing new things in the world as well. I miss travel so much, and one of the big things I look forward to once this all lifts is actually going abroad and visiting different places and having new experiences. I think having been locked up for a bit too long, those things now become more important than ever, I think.
Yeah, definitely. Well, we're all fingers crossed that we're going to be allowed to travel soon. Now I just wanted to talk to you then about your role, and we talked about how you sort of got into number 10 and you're as part of your campaign. I know it's only been a couple of months, but and you've been in lockdown, so I guess you haven't been able to do too much, but what are you seeing, small bits of progress in your new role?
Yeah, so one of the biggest things that I wanted to focus on is this transition back to school, and I really wanted to make sure that we were funding mental health support teams. So these support teams that work with schools to provide counselling, psychological support, support for the teachers and the students as well. And this is a program that was being rolled out, but actually I think could have been done much quicker. So managed to secure about £80 million for that, as well as for CAM services as well. So reasonable sum of money. Of course, we need much more and we need to go further, but it is a start, and it's difficult because Rome isn't built in a day. Things take time. I wish I could go in and just click my fingers and everything would change. It's not as simple as that. But moving forward, we need to fund mental health support services, mental health services in general, more than ever, because I think we're gonna see more mental health difficulties, more referrals, more people reaching out needing help, and the support services need to be available for them, and it does come down to funding. Of course, that's important. I also want to work on stigma as well, so I'm doing a lot of work with the schools, with Department of Education, creating kind of videos and tips and advice, and I'm also going to be a part of some ongoing work on stigma in the months to come, particularly in the summer. So yeah, it's going to be there's a lot of exciting things to do, and I'm working very hard.
You say it's not much, but it sounds like that's done. It's brilliant.
Definitely.
And I find it interesting, actually, because you talk about that work with schools, about kids going back to school. I mean, I suppose we sort of think, oh, they're going back now, it's going to be all right. But it's quite a big step, isn't it, if you've been on your own or homeschooling at home for a long time. So I guess there is that kind of reintegration process. And to some extent, we've got that this month because, non-essential retailers reopened. We've got a lot of travel agents going back into their place of work, into their branches on the high street, into call centres and things. So you don't necessarily think that actually people might need support when they're coming back into the workplace as opposed to being sort of stuck home alone.
Yeah, absolutely. I think when you go back, I think it's, if you look at what's happening right now and the restrictions are slowly lifting, yeah, we look forward to that, of course, but it brings up of anxiety as well. When I think of going back to busy pub or busy environment, I wouldn't, right now, I personally wouldn't want to go into a busy bar. That gives me anxiety. Or going back, if I had to go find I work in an A&E and it's a slightly different scenario, but going back into, a busy office, I'd imagine would give people worry, or traveling or being on a busy plane or something. So I think it's about, supporting people to take the time. And I actually spoke about this on my socials recently, that, don't see these restrictions lifting as milestones that you have to hit. You don't have to be ready to go back to the pub just because the pubs are open. Mm-hmm. I think doing that at your own pace is probably much more sensible and much more likely to not induce such anxiety, I think. And take your time with everything, and, talk to people around you, talk to your work colleagues, because some people will be like, I can't wait to get back, like that, they want to do it. But there's a lot of people that won't feel that way, and kind of speaking with those and kind of maybe doing things gently and say, in your friendship group, a couple of people might be like, oh, let's go to the pub. Others might be like, well, actually, I feel more comfortable going to the park and having a few drinks. We'll club together with the ones that feel that way and don't feel like you're pressurized to get there,
Yeah, I think that's really good advice. Alex, I just wanted to ask you about another thing, obviously, relating to this. We obviously saw the death of Nicky Graham, the Big Brother star, from anorexia. So we think about depression and anxiety and suicide, but anorexia is another condition related to mental health. And I know her mother talked about how she was struggling with the fact that gyms weren't open because she only felt she could eat and if she could then exercise afterwards, and that was something that really affected her. So, as well as the suicide, you're talking about the rising numbers of suicides. I mean, there's other issues that perhaps you don't immediately think of when you say mental health, and we need to be aware of all of these, don't we?
Of course. I mean, we've seen a spike in eating disorders and self-harm, particularly in young people during the pandemic and moving out of the pandemic now. So mental health is a broad spectrum, and when we talk about health, actually, we're not necessarily talking about ill health. Mental illness and mental health are different. I mean, they're terms that are used quite interchangeably, but everyone has mental health, right? We all live and breathe, and if you have thoughts and feelings, you have mental health, don't you? Mental illness obviously is a spectrum of that, and amongst that you've got so many different issues. And as I say, eating disorders has been massively on the rise, because I think it comes down to, this is way overcomplicated. Undercomplicating, or not obviously I'm generalizing the issue, but one of the factors that plays a point is that when we remove control from people's lives, particularly with eating disorders, it can exacerbate those things. It stands to kind of reason. There's so many factors that play a part, but that's one of them. And of course, a lot of the experts are trying to hypothesize why these things have been on the rise, and I think only time will tell. But it's a very sad case that you talk about. It's really, really sad, and any loss of life is awful, and particularly from something that can be seen as potentially a preventable cause of death. Very sad indeed. So we have to continue to raise awareness of these things and make sure, as I said, we're funding support services so that when people need the help, that it's actually there.
Okay, all right. And just coming to a close, and I'm conscious of your time, Alex, but I did also see you tweet about the language we use and this whole being kind to people. And you'd said, please, can we all try to be a little kinder to each other online? We're all doing our best. Life right now is pretty tough for all of us. Let's pull together and unite rather than divide. Never forget, it's a human being with real emotions and feelings. I'm not sure what prompted that. It was on March the 23rd. I don't know if you can remember why you tweeted that, but this is another issue. We've got to be more aware, haven't we, that people might seem all right on the outside, but something we say or could have a really big or damaging effect.
Yeah, well, I think a lot of people, particularly, people are on edge at the moment and stressed out with the pandemic. And I think I saw a lot of negativity online, just in general, actually on Twitter, just about unrelated topics, related topics. And I just felt like, come on, let's all pull together a bit here. It doesn't, we're all in this together, aren't we? Let's be a bit, more united. And I think that's something that, I hope to see more. Human beings, we disagree a lot, but, being kind isn't hard to be kind. You've got to remember that when you're writing something or tweeting something, it might be off the cuff for you, but it might really impact someone. So just thinking about it a little bit.
Yeah. Well, I was looking at your sort of CV, I guess, of all that you're doing. I mean, I guess keeping busy keeps your mind, healthy. I mean, you're doing so much. Obviously you're an A&E doctor, but you're also now, you've written a book, you're an author. I mean, you're doing YouTube and Instagram, of course, we know all about that. Charity work, I think, as well. But so tell us about your new book that I think is going to be published next month.
Yeah, so Live Well Every Day. I've been writing this for quite a while, and the concept came when I was looking about how I look after my happiness and my health and my well-being, and some of the things I've learned throughout the last few years, professionally and personally, about self-care. Whether it's sleep, whether it's passion and purpose, whether it's sexual health, whether it's fitness. All these aspects, and dealing with online, as you mentioned, with social media, all these kind of aspects in your life come together to affect your health and happiness. So making small changes and evaluating decisions you're making might help in just improving how you feel. It's not a manual blueprint to this is how to live a perfect life, and it's a lot of it's talking about the mistakes I've made. But from those I've learned lessons that I think mean now that I know more about how to take care of myself, basically. And I hope that the book will help people reading it to learn some of those lessons too.
Well, you very kindly agreed to sign a copy of your book once it's out, and anyone watching this who posts in the comments section below will go into a draw, and we will make sure that a copy of Tice's book goes.
Fantastic,
to you. So
thank you.
Make sure you do that. You talk about having made mistakes in your life, but you surely don't regret having gone on Love Island, because it has given you this wonderful platform. It's very different what you're doing now, isn't it? I mean, that's how you came to our attention, but you've definitely used your fame, it seems, to something really meaningful, and really worthwhile.
Absolutely. I mean, I don't regret it at all. I think it was an experience, one experience of a lifetime, really. And there's been good and bad. I think everything in life comes with good and bad points, but on the whole, yeah, I think it was a good decision. All
right. Well, we're so grateful for you sparing your time today. We wish you luck in all the endeavours you're doing, but particularly the ones around mental health, because it is so important. And I know people watching this in the travel industry will be hanging off your every word and hopefully reading your new book. But for now, Dr. Alex, thank you so much for your time.
Thank you so much. Thank you for your time.
Thank you again, Dr. Alex, for giving up your time to share your thoughts and experiences. Okay, now earlier on we heard from Celebrity Cruises about its support for this event and its commitment to positive mental health. And now it's time to hear from another sponsor as we watch this video from Travel Zoo UK General Manager James Clark.
Hi everyone, I'm sincerely proud that Travel Zoo are associated and sponsors of Travel Weekly's Mental Health Matters event. Mental health is a subject that I am personally close to, and I'm so pleased that it's also an area that Travel Zoo continue to lead in. Over the past year, it has become even more apparent that we are all more fragile, more vulnerable, and are at greater risk of our mental health being impeded than ever before. The impact on our industry has seen our lives affected in ways that we could never have imagined. We have all witnessed the dramatic increase in work pressures whilst trying to manage new and existing pressures in our personal lives. To compound these even further, our freedom and ability to escape, to reset, to refresh was taken away. Suddenly, we were all put into a position of uncertainty, one that no one could have prepared for. There is also a sense of irony in how our industry in particular plays such a pivotal role in improving one's mental health. We create escapism. We create the ability for people to leave the norm and find their happy place. And then personally, I have never needed a holiday more. I have also found these 12 months mentally challenging. Whether it was the desire to protect my job, my income, and the stability that this brings my family, or the pressure of leading a company through a crisis, or simply the anxiety of the unknown. I have broken down more than once, but this time was different. I know my triggers, and most importantly, I know when to speak out. An action that sadly so many others do not know or are able to make. At Travel Zoo, we take the subject of mental health seriously, from mental health ambassadors to a complimentary counselling service, to a weekly mind, body and breathe sessions. We even dedicate the whole month of May to mental health awareness and look to how we can improve work-life balance for our colleagues. It is clear we are focused on improving mental health for our people, but like all businesses, we also recognise it is an ever-changing environment and one size certainly does not fit all. We all need to do more. So whilst we are here as sponsors today, we are also here to learn and take back more guidance on how we can look after our people and provide better mental health support. Keep well.
Thank you, James, for that honest and inspiring message, and to Travel Zoo for your support of today's virtual brunch. And now it's time for our third and final session of today's event, as we speak to 3 people working on travel's front line, as they tell us about their experiences of mental health during the pandemic. A lot of their stories will be familiar to many of you, and as I mentioned earlier, we understand that some of the subjects discussed may have particular resonance for you. Please remember that if you or someone you know has been affected by a mental health issue or needs support, it is available from within and outside our industry, and those contact details are on the screen again now, should you need them. So now let's hear from our frontline travel panel. Well, hello again, everyone, and I'd like to welcome you to our panel that we've put together for our virtual mental health brunch. And I'm delighted to talk today to 3 people on the absolute front line, been really dealing with things through the pandemic. It's been really hard for everyone, as we know, and I think it'd be really interesting to hear your stories. So we've got Sandra Corkin, who's from Oasis Travel over in Northern Ireland, Emma Kane from Kane Travel, and Natalie Holder from Hurtigruten. So welcome to all of you. Thank you for joining us.
Morning.
Good morning. All right, look, so we just want to hear your stories. As I said at the outset there, I mean, we've all been through very tough times. I think that's fair to say, but everyone's got a sort of different perspective. Sandra, let's talk to you, because you're obviously running a business. So it's not only sort of keeping yourself motivated through all of this, but you've had a team of people that you've also had to look after and make difficult decisions over, as as business has been tough. So tell us what experience has been like for you.
Yeah. Well, it has been particularly difficult. Lucy, I know that you know that at the start of lockdown, my brother, who was our financial director, died. It actually was just before the first lockdown. So That was really, really tough then, coming into the pandemic without a financial director. Gary had been here for over 25 years. We have a really strong sort of family team in Oasis. So I think not only did it affect me, but it affected a lot of the people that he worked closely with. So I think that was a really sort of, I felt that I was going into the pandemic and all the challenges at a really low point in my life, and probably a low point for other people too. But, I just kind of kept thinking that he would want the business to survive, and he had worked so hard here and he had so many aspirations and plans for the future. And he really just had a very short illness. So we had no time to plan on him not returning to work. That was never really going to be an option. So I just think it was, it was difficult dealing with that, and then just been thrown into chaos. It just feels for a year. And actually probably now, this is the first time I think that I have been able to sort of take a deep breath and clear a bit of space in my head, which is important.
Yeah.
But I think it's now that I've really started to feel, maybe even more emotional about it all, because I think the tears at the beginning were all for him. During the year, it was just about the survival of the business. And now, whenever you have time to look back, you sort of think, I feel a bit shell-shocked by it all now.
It's interesting you say you now feel you're getting a bit of clarity, because I know you said to me that actually the whole of the last year, without his guidance and advice, you said to me it felt like a complete blur,
Yes.
a very low point in your life. So I mean, how did you manage? Was it just throwing yourself into work? Did you have somebody to talk to, or the rest of your family, or were your colleagues, did they sort of step up and help?
Look, I have a brilliant team here, and my colleagues have been more than supportive. My sister-in-law, Gary's wife, is an accountant, and she gave up her job and has come into the business full time. And my son Scott, he's in a final year business management degree at Queen's University. And of course, the universities haven't been open. So Wendy, that's my sister-in-law, my son Scott and I have been in work every day since March last year. So we kind of kept a routine going. So we get up early in the morning, do a few miles of a walk before work, clear the head, and then I've been working with my sister-in-law and my son every day in the office. And we would do regular calls to the rest of our colleagues. We have a list of things we've been doing, because I've actually realised during it, not only did I experience loss, but I think with 6 other members of staff who lost family members. So, you know, I was really trying to help and do things that would help to support them also.
Okay, all right. Well, we'll come back on and talk to you in a bit about other things you've done, Sandra. Thank you for that. Emma, let's talk to you, because you and I have spoken already a little bit about what you've been through. You know, you'd started a business fairly recently, and then I think you'd had to put it into hibernation, really. You were going out to get another job, you know, financial worries. Obviously, you had your customers. You didn't want to let them down. I mean, it was a really difficult time, and we're probably 6 months on from that now. Can you sort of update us on where you are with your business and what's been happening?
Of course. Well, for me, I mean, first of all, Sandra, I'm really sorry for your loss. Okay. For me, my situation also took a turn. I think before I was quite cynical over COVID as a whole. I think a lot of business owners, speaking to them, they were the same as me, really, thinking that the government were doing things on purpose, even bringing Brexit into it at one point. Until 2 days before Christmas, I lost my mum to COVID really suddenly. 9 days before, she had a COVID test, which was positive, and shockingly, 9 days later, she passed away. And it's all been put into perspective for me now. This is real. And yes, of course, we all have our own feelings about what the government are doing at the moment, have done and will do. But for me, it was all about... I mean, I'm lucky. I'm really lucky. I still have my business. I've got a loving family around me who have just held me up. They've absolutely propped me up throughout this whole pandemic, especially the loss of my mum. But going forward, I'm looking at it in a way that I'm going to restart my business. I have no option. The difference is this time I have a database, I have loyal customers, and I have the most wonderful team. There's just 3 of us all together, 2 girls plus me, and we just are such a solid team. They've been fantastic throughout the whole pandemic. I had a problem with my accountant last year, which I just settled out of court because I was so distraught, obviously, over the Christmas period. And kind of even that, it's made me rethink everything going forward. We're still in the process of refunding after Debt 2 have obviously cancelled. I totally understand now. Before I was kind of, why is this happening, blah, blah. And now I'm kind of, it is what it is. We've got to just stand firm, get on with this, and we will come through the other end. Like you, Sandra, in memory of your brother, my mum always said to me, this is going to be the making or breaking of you, Emma. And I do believe it will be the making. And in memory of my mum, I will make sure it is. We have got green shoots. Let's make them into oak trees as fast as we can, because one thing's for sure, I think we've learned, is that no amount of speaking to the government is ever going to change their mind. They're going to do what's right, in their view, for the population of Great Britain. And I agree with them now, having experienced it firsthand. We do have to look after people. And I think going forward, really, we just need to put it in perspective and manage it the best way we can.
Yeah, well, tremendous strength that both of you have shown. And it sounds, Emma, like it was sort of a degree of acceptance that allowed you to sort of let go of your anger and then to try and focus your head on your business again, and to just try and rebuild. And as you say, start from fresh, really.
100%. I was becoming quite angry and bitter as well. I've never been a bitter person, but this was kind of having that effect. I mean, we're talking about mental health. And I've always been the positive person. I've always had the positive outlook. It's sunshine wherever I am. But it really was having that effect on me, making me bitter. And the fallout with my accountant didn't help. Yeah. And then obviously it was just being a new business to then have to refund. I now have debt bigger than my personal mortgage. And that's my business debt. But even now, I can see a way out. Hopefully, I mean, it's a long way out, don't get me wrong, but you know what, we can either let this beat us or we can rise above it, be there for our customers, but more so be there for ourselves, and be the strong people that we all are in travel. We are positive people, and we always try and do the best for our customers, and I don't see really that that's ever going to change for any of us.
Oh, well, it's brilliant to hear, and we'll come back and talk to you in a bit more about, you know, coming out that other side and those green shoots. That I think that would be helpful for everyone. But let's bring Natalie in. So Natalie, you, I think, had just started a new job at Hurtigruten as we were going into the pandemic. So that's hard in itself, isn't it? Because then suddenly you can't be with all your colleagues, but also your job would have normally been out on the road, meeting people. And I guess you had to just adapt to that very quickly. And that has taken its toll, hasn't it?
Yeah, I mean, for me personally, I live on my own, so I'm a very sociable butterfly, like you say, go out visiting members. We just had our brand new ship come to the UK, so we were hosting loads of, you know, agent days, and we were just meeting and greeting everybody, and then all of a sudden the world felt like it stopped. And I've always been really focused on my career. That's been the one thing that's kind of kept me going, and then to have that almost taken away at that point, when, you know, the announcement was made, gosh, I was just devastated is the word. You know, I was absolutely devastated. I felt really alone. I'm by myself. I'm thinking, how am I going to pay my mortgage in my house? You know, if I don't have a job. It was that unknowing of what the future was going to be that was really just unbearable. And so then I was put on furlough for the 2 months. And your first initial thought is, right, you know, who knows what company's going to survive? Is it, you know, last in, first out sort of thing? So it's all these things. And I think my anxiety really took over at this point. And then my good friend Si, he said to me, right, Natalie, you've got to start doing things. So it's simple things like making the bed in the morning. That's the first job to do in the morning. Do that. And then I was so lucky with Hurtigruten. They really looked after me, all kept in contact, had weekly calls. And then they brought me back from furlough because they recognised that I was by myself. And that, you know, these were the reasons why they brought me back. They know I could handle the emergency situations, but they recognised that I was alone. And again, that meant I had my career back again. And it was just an emotional roller coaster over those first 2 months. And then to be brought back, you know, and then dealing with, you know, all the refunds, all the government changes. It was just a minefield, but it helped me learn so much about the company, agents. It was such a massive learning curve, and it gave me a focus again.
Let me just focus on this furlough thing, because, you know, it's a good thing, isn't it? You know, it allows people to keep in their jobs when ordinarily they might not have been able to have kept them. So it is a good thing. But a lot of people I've spoken to said they actually felt sort of like, oh, well, I'm obviously not important enough. I'm obviously not, and they felt quite like they weren't part of the team, even though they were doing their bit for the company. Yeah. It's an interesting, you know, how, and you say you actually felt still anxious that perhaps you wouldn't have a job at the end of it. So talk to us about how it, so I know you managed by doing little jobs, but how did you get through those 2 months?
I mean, initially it was really difficult because none of us had heard the word furlough. Well, I certainly hadn't. So I didn't know what furlough was. And then I felt guilty that I was taking money for not actually working. So I had to go through that thought process of I'm getting paid to do nothing. So then I was doing things like going online, learning online, refreshing my own skills of social media and marketing that I've got the background. Doing little things like that, making sure that I was making fresh food. It's really little things that you take for granted, but planning your day out like that, where you know, make sure that you had a nice breakfast, go for a walk, explore where you live, which, you know, I'd never known half the places where I actually did discover. And talking to friends was a huge thing. So, you know, you have these face party things, Zooms. It's amazing what technology does, where it brings you back in touch with people.
So you didn't have that kind of loneliness and those anxieties that you were on your own.
Yeah, exactly. So at the beginning it was, oh gosh, like, I am by myself, I have a mortgage by myself, how am I going to do this? And then you kind of build yourself up by talking. I think talking is the main thing here, is that you talk to your friends, you talk to your family, and you'll find out that, you know, everyone is behind you, everyone is around you. You do have people that care, no matter how alone you feel. And it does help you bring you out the other side of that anxiety and loneliness.
Yeah, okay. You're nodding, Sandra. I mean, presumably you said you kept in touch having these calls. I know you had your son and, you know, your sister-in-law in the office, but you've got your other employees and your colleagues. So were you still able to talk to them every day? How did you keep everybody connected?
Yes, so there is a team that I would be speaking to every day, and we do a whole company call once a week. You know, we've done things like got everybody involved in the call, asking people to make cocktails or put on a cookery demonstration or have a pet coffee morning where you're supposed to bring your dog and somebody brought a goat. And we have had such a laugh with each other because we find out about each other. So we do the Zoom call, and then some weeks we put everybody into separate meeting rooms, and it really has got to get us to know each other a little bit better. And we have then run relaxation classes, and at the minute we're doing a healing class because we have you know, so many people that have suffered loss. So we are really trying. It is that as Natalie said, you know, the continual connection and having somebody to talk to, and you know, giving people the confidence to know that they can say if they don't feel all right. And, you know, there's a couple of the staff that I do talk to, and, you know, when I say, you okay? And they actually say, no, I'm not. So it's being honest, you know, and some of those are guys. It's really, you know, having the confidence to be honest with each other and know that, you know, we're there to help and support each other. So, you know, like as Emma said, I just feel really lucky to have people around me. And it is about people at the end of the day, because I think
that's the thing, isn't it? People always say, as long as you can feel that you can reach out to someone, but of course, so many people perhaps don't have that confidence. So it's great what you've done to really create an environment where people feel that they can share and hopefully get that support.
And I suppose coming out the other side of it, Lucy, I think, right, I've done the financial restructure, I've taken out the loans, I've like Emma said, refunds, but cleaning the offices, getting everything ready to reopen. But I know that it's the team that's going to ultimately get us out of it, because they're the salespeople, and that's what we need. And it's just making sure, you know, that they're in a good position to do that. And I'm confident that they are. I do feel blessed.
Did you furlough some people, Sandra? Did you have to use the furlough scheme?
We had most of our team. We have about 50 staff, so with most people furloughed. So with a small team of about 10 working on telephone bookings, and then we will bring, whenever the office is open, we're changing that team to 18. So 3 in the office whenever we'll come back. But it's still, it's still risk, and it's hard. Mm-hmm.
I'm sure, but it does feel like, I mean, do you all now feel like we're, you know, as like Emma said, she's got these debts, it's going to be a long time getting out of them, but you obviously feel now, Emma, that there is this light at the end of the tunnel. Would you say that you do feel more confident now than you have done for the last year or so?
I'm a little bit mixed, if I'm honest. Confident because I do feel positive about the future. I do feel we've just opened the shop on very minimal hours, so we're on flexi furlough now. We have taken advantage of furlough, but now we've kind of used the flexi furlough. So we're only open for a few hours a day because people, they're inquiring in our area, but they're still not confident to book. So for us, it was about maintaining that face-to-face contact with customers, and we have a shop big enough where we can social distance and have people in the shop, and they love to come in and speak to us, see how we've been, and again, you know, that face-to-face contact and talking to people, actual people, once again in the flesh. So that's been really good for us, and the outlook is positive on that regard, because they are all they've got their holidays in abeyance. They're waiting to book. I think they're just waiting for the announcement, as we all are. I am a little bit fearful, if I'm honest. I do see it already. I do feel it already, that within 5 minutes, we're all going to go back to normal. The world is going to return to normal. People are, the roads, they're so busy again. People are forgetting their masks now. People aren't social distancing. And I do think that, it's going to be a stop, start. Maybe not as much as before, because obviously we have the vaccinations now. But the next hurdle for us is things like COVID passports. Is that going to come into fruition? Things like that. There's a lot more understanding that we need, and I think the general public need to bear in mind that this is still a tough situation, and we still need to be cautious. So I'm positive, but I am a little bit fearful, if I'm honest.
Well, you've been through a lot, and obviously you don't really want that stop-start. That was something that was very difficult for you all last year. So I completely understand where you're coming from. Natalie, just to, Sandra was saying they're doing these healing courses and stuff as a business. Have you been able to lean on, Her to Group News as a company? I know you said they recognised you were alone and they brought you back quickly, but have they sort of been able to support you in other ways, or any other associations that you've been able to sort of lean into?
Yeah, Her to Group have been absolutely amazing throughout this whole process. And the general manager has said, I'm just at the end of a phone call and I feel comfortable that I can call him. We always keep in contact, and we celebrate things like birthdays together. We put an online maternity baby shower. It's just important things like that, just keeping in contact with each other, having that open door policy, which I think is really important, and not being afraid to air what you're upset or scared for. And yeah, I'm really lucky that my company do have these steps in place. We have an online intranet where they do have the mindfulness lessons. And I think mental health is just such an important topic that I think every company needs to look at what their mental health offerings are to their employees, and make sure that it's up to scratch for everyone, really.
And is that something you were always aware of, or do you think that what we've all been through has really put it into focus?
I think for me personally, I have been aware of, mental health in the workplace previously, and what's right and what's wrong. However, I do feel that with the pandemic now, I think it should be opened up to all companies to have something in place for everybody, because this is unprecedented times. None of us could have guessed half of what we've all experienced. But if this is what we can all get through, then let's take this as, our base, learn from this, and see what we can do to improve for anything else that life throws at us, really.
Absolutely. And of course, you're out talking to travel agents and all the time now that you're back. And have you been able to sort of transfer what you've learned, and I guess your own feelings? You're aware that other people might be feeling like that. Are you able to now sort of spot if other people are struggling when you're doing your calls, etc.?
Yeah, I think as awful as this sounds, it has brought us all together. We've all experienced something that has made us uncomfortable, anxious. It's taken a toll on all of us in some way or another. And I think the agents I've spoken to, we're all very open with each other. We've had the ups where personally we thought we were going to sail within the UK last September, and then that got taken away. Then Christmas, we were all ready to celebrate with our families. That got taken away, and I think it's all a case of just, God, how are you? Are you okay? Are you really okay? I think that's the big question, and I think we're all a little bit more open to say, like you said, Sandra, yes or no.
Yeah, don't just say the British, yes, I'm fine, and if you're not. So in terms of moving forward, Sandra, then will you keep all these sort of things in place? Is it something that you see being a sort of long-term support for your team? And also just bringing people back. I know there's lots of people who are anxious now. We were anxious being alone, but actually reintegrating back into society, coming back into the workplace, particularly with what Emma's saying about some people being a bit more lax about some of the rules and a bit more cavalier, and that presents a sort of issue in itself, doesn't it? Sort of coming back. I know lots of people are desperate to, but others are perhaps a bit, reservations around it.
Definitely, it's been a challenge working out how we're going to come back to work. And like Emma, we're going to do reduced hours and we're going to part-time furlough people. So initially I thought, whenever I was having the calls with the branches, that it was going to be those people who were coming back to work were going to feel kind of slightly disadvantaged because they're not earning that much more than people who are staying at home. But it actually turned out to be the opposite, that unless everybody's a good actor, that people really wanted to get back to work. And those who aren't in our sort of phase one, a lot of them felt sort of disappointed, and sort of that was a bit emotional, because it was like, why am I not coming back? I'm really fed up. I really need to do something. So that's been a bit of a challenge, but it's reassuring everybody that it just is a phased approach, and the only reason that it's like that is purely down to money and affordability, because we can't go back to paying salary. I would love to bring everybody back. If we had the money to do it, we would do it, but we can't do it, and we don't know what business is going to be like. In terms of continuing things, yes, we have done things in the past more based on well-being. We've had grants from our local council to get sort of healthy food into the office and to run sort of kind of with courses with a personal trainer and exercise things, but we haven't really focused on the mindfulness classes and that type of thing. But I definitely intend to continue it. I think it's necessary.
Really, really good to hear. And Emma, I know you've only got you and your couple of girls, but are they all keen to come back? Have any of them got any sort of reservations or anxieties? Have you had to sort of talk that through with them?
I think the main concern for us is, does the uniform fit? If I'm honest, I'm pleased to say it does. But no, we were all dying to get back. I mean, I did have to take a second job, and I'm continuing with my second job until the business turns and money starts coming in. But luckily, I can keep the girls. They are the face of the business, and as Sandra said before, we need the sales people.
Yeah.
I do touch base, obviously. I am overseeing the business, but they are on the front line with speaking to customers, and they are the ones who are really happy to be in the shop. So that's what we're doing at the moment.
You say it in quite a kind of matter-of-fact way, but taking a second job and still having the pressure of running a business and having two people's incomes dependent on you. I mean that it must be exhausting. You've got kids as well. You're smiling, but do you feel like at some point, do you think sometimes you're just like, oh, it's overwhelming what you've actually had to go through?
It is overwhelming at times, but the thing is, I'm the type of person who just gets on with things, and it's always been the case for me. And I have a mortgage to pay too, as well as business debt now. Luckily, I can keep them separate, but while Evercane Travel isn't bringing in the money and we're refunding, then it just makes sense to take on a second job. So I'm happy to do it. It's actually been good to see a different perspective on a different trade, if I'm honest.
Remind us what you went on to do. Did you work?
So I'm working for a survey team for the Office for National Statistics.
Yeah.
And it's quite interesting to see what's going on behind the scenes as far as COVID's concerned, obviously, after what happened to my mum. And there are a lot of things going on behind the scenes that the general public really aren't aware of. So it's kind of given me a bit of perspective in that field as well. But also something totally different to travel. I've been in travel since I was 19 years old. So it is nice to have a look at something else and see what other people do.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, it's great attitude. I'm so impressed by all of you. Okay, well, we're really close to time, but for anybody watching this, what would be the sort of takeaways? What advice would you give, Natalie, if people are feeling, particularly those people who are still on their own, perhaps still furloughed, maybe out till September, because you've been there, and there'll be people who haven't worked for over a year. What would you say to them?
I would say make sure you talk to people. That's first and foremost. Take each day as it comes. Don't look too far ahead into the future, because that's where your anxiety builds up. Just look today. Put those tasks in for the day. Tick them. If you've achieved them, you've done something for the day. And just reach out.
Okay, very good advice. Sandra, what about you? What would you say?
Yeah, I think every morning I get up, I try to find things to be grateful for, and that really helps, and focusing on the positive. Even when I was cleaning the toilets the other day, Lucy, getting the office ready, I thought, I'm glad I have an office to get ready, even though this is what I find myself doing. But just finding things to be grateful for helps me.
Yeah, really good advice. And final word from you, Emma.
Mine is quite simple, really, and I suppose it duplicates what Natalie said. Mine is one day at a time. We can't look after things that are beyond our control. Just take it one day at a time and don't carry the weight of the world on your shoulders.
All right. Well, listen, we are so grateful for you to share, sharing your stories with us and being so honest about it. We're so sorry for your loss, both of you, Sandra and Emma. And we just wish you all the best. It does feel, certainly speaking to you all, that you do feel like there's more hope and positivity. I hope that continues. Perhaps we'll speak to you again in a few months' time, and hopefully we'll get a good summer and you'll all be in a much better position. But thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you very much for
having us. Thank you.
Well, thank you to our panel and to all of our speakers today. We hope you found our virtual brunch helpful and that it's offered you some support if you are facing your own personal challenges or running a travel company. Our Mental Health Matters series of features will be continuing in print and online in the coming months ahead. So if you or your company would like to get involved or share your story, please do get in touch. For now, it just remains for me to thank you all for joining us. And once again, a huge thank you to Travelzoo and Celebrity Cruises for their support of today's event. Goodbye for now.
Travel Weekly's Mental Health Matters virtual brunch, supported by Travelzoo and Celebrity Cruises.